invasive green lizards now thawing out in South Florida after our weekend cold snap. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission says over 5,000 iguanas were removed from the wild since January 30th.
The footage you're about to see came out of Florida in early February 2026, and it is genuinely difficult to watch. Cell phone videos showing hundreds of frozen iguanas scattered across yards like they'd been dropped from the sky. Drone shots of over 900 manatees crammed shoulder to shoulder into a single spring, desperately clinging to the only warm water left in the state. Rescue teams pulling lifeless sea turtles from the shallows. Animals that looked dead but still had faint heartbeats. And beach after beach lined with fish that didn't survive the night.
I found the majority of my frozen iguanas out by the beach. I think that air coming off of the cold water is even colder for them, and we're expecting to find many more iguanas this morning out there.
When an unprecedented Arctic blast tore through the Sunshine State, it shattered temperature records that had stood for over a century and triggered a wildlife catastrophe that stunned even the experts who study these animals for a living. This is what happened when winter hit a place that was never built to handle it. And the scenes that played out are not for the faint-hearted. The frozen rain. Here's the thing about green iguanas. They're cold-blooded. Every movement they make, every breath, every heartbeat depends on heat from the outside world. When air temperatures drop below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, their muscles start locking up. They can't grip. They can't move. They enter a state called torpor, a kind of biological shutdown where the body goes rigid and the animal appears completely dead. And when that happens while they're perched 30 feet up in a tree, gravity does the rest. During the first week of February 2026, that's exactly what happened across South Florida, not to a few iguanas, to thousands. Miami dropped to 35 degrees that morning, smashing a daily record that had stood since 1909. West Palm Beach hit 30 degrees, its coldest reading in 36 years. Orlando plunged to 24, Daytona Beach to 23, Melbourne to 25. Wind chills across Broward County sank into the mid-20s. Snow flurries were spotted in Tampa, Sarasota, and Jacksonville. Icicles formed on the Universal, Orlando Globe. The National Weather Service confirmed that every single one of their Central Florida climate stations broke daily and monthly cold records on both Sunday and Monday. And across South Florida, iguanas were raining from the trees. Sidewalks were covered, driveways, hedgerows, pool decks. Wilkins, a professional trapper with redline iguana removal, said his team collected roughly 2,500 iguanas in just 2 days. He told reporters he had never, not once, seen anything remotely close to this. Another collector, Stephen Kavashansky, owner of Iguana Busters, pulled 200 frozen iguanas off a single golf course in Lake Worth in one afternoon. He said when he arrived, the course looked like a battlefield. Now, pay attention to this part. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission had seen the forecasts and moved fast. They issued a special executive order on January 30th that temporarily allowed any Florida resident to collect cold-stunned iguanas without a permit, something that's normally illegal, and bring them to 5 designated FWC offices across South and Southwest Florida. Green iguanas are an invasive species. They can't be relocated. They can't be released. So, the clock was ticking. The response blew past anything officials expected. On the first day alone, around 600 iguanas were turned in. By Monday afternoon, the numbers were still climbing. And when FWC Executive Director Roger Young stood up at the agency's February commission meeting in Tallahassee, the room went quiet. The final count, 5,195 green iguanas collected and removed in 48 hours. The Sunrise office alone took in 3,882. Tequesta received 1,075. Most were humanely euthanized. Some were transferred to licensed handlers for out-of-state sale. Young called the public response extraordinary, the kind of coordinated effort that only happens when people witness something they can't look away from. And the FWC had one very firm warning for anyone thinking about bringing a frozen iguana inside to warm up. Don't. These animals recover from torpor faster than people expect. And when they wake up, they bite, they scratch, they whip muscular tails that can leave serious welts. Several residents found that out the hard way. If you're subscribed, you already know we cover the wildest stories nature has to offer. If you're not, now's a good time. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the iguanas were just the surface. Beneath Florida's waterways, something far more emotional was unfolding. And the footage is hard to watch. 900 giants and one spring manatees are not like iguanas. They're warm-blooded, they're native, they're beloved. And they were in serious trouble. Here's the deal. Despite their massive size, some weigh over 1,000 pounds, manatees carry only about an inch of body fat. Their metabolism is painfully slow. They cannot generate enough internal heat to survive in cold water, the way other marine mammals can. When water temperatures drop below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, manatees begin developing a condition called cold stress. Their digestion slows, their immune system weakens, skin lesions appear, pneumonia sets in. Without access to warmer water, cold stress is fatal. So, when the Arctic blast hit, every manatee in Florida did the only thing it could do. It ran. They fled inland, pushing up rivers and into freshwater springs, the only places where temperatures hold steady year-round. Blue Springs State Park in Orange City became the epicenter. The spring maintains a constant 72 degrees, making it one of the most critical manatee refuges in the entire state. And get this. Less than a week before the cold snap, park researchers counted fewer than 70 manatees in the spring run. That's a normal winter number, but by Monday, February 2nd, that number had exploded. Over 900 manatees. In one spring, shoulder to shoulder, packed so tightly you could barely see the water beneath them. The footage from that morning is breathtaking and heartbreaking at the same time. Hundreds of these enormous, gentle animals crammed into a narrow channel of warm water because it was the only thing keeping them alive. Others gathered around power plant discharge areas along the coast, where heated industrial water flows into canals. Wildlife officials designated some of those zones as temporary no-entry areas for boats and jet skis, because even a minor disturbance could panic the manatees into swimming back out into cold water. And at those temperatures, that could mean death. Just days before the worst of the cold arrived, FWC staff rescued 2 young manatees from Bear Creek in St. Petersburg, both already showing visible cold stress lesions on their skin. They were rushed to the Mote Marine Laboratory for emergency rehabilitation, but the manatees at least had somewhere to go. The sea turtles weren't so lucky. And what rescuers found along Florida's coastline stopped them in their tracks. Floating like the Dead Sea, turtles are cold-blooded. When water temperatures drop to around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, their bodies begin shutting down. Heart rate plummets. Muscles stop responding. They lose the ability to swim, to dive, to do anything at all. They float to the surface or wash up on shore, completely motionless. To anyone who finds one, they look dead. But many of them are still alive, trapped in a state of near-total biological shutdown, helpless and drifting. During this cold snap, the rescues were staggering. The FWC reported that more than 500 cold-stunned sea turtles were recovered across the state. In the Florida Panhandle alone, local rescue teams pulled 600 turtles from the water, the single largest cold-stun rescue operation they had ever conducted. This is definitely the largest that Gulf Specimen Marine Lab has ever dealt with, said rehab coordinator Hunter Eichler. We've never seen numbers like this. An additional 200 or more were recovered across Central Florida and Tampa Bay, regions that almost never see cold stun events at all. At SeaWorld Orlando, the rescue team took in 16 large green sea turtles from frigid waters near Titusville in Brevard County. Several had visible stress damage on their shells and skin. The team began working around the clock with FWC, carefully raising each turtle's body temperature a few degrees per day. Because here's what most people don't realize. Warming a cold-stunned turtle too quickly can kill it. The thermal shock alone can cause organ failure. Tim Binder, Senior Vice President of Animal Care at the Florida Aquarium, put it bluntly. Sea turtles are the first animals to go down when a cold snap hits. They spend most of their time near the surface to breathe, and that's exactly where the water cools fastest. He said the turtles arrive critically ill, bodies depressed, functions suppressed, and it takes days before his team can even determine what's happening inside them. And he had a warning for the public. If you find a cold-stunned sea turtle, do not pick it up. Do not put it in your car. Do not try to warm it. Call wildlife officials. Because a well-meaning rescue attempt can turn fatal in minutes. But here's the moment that made it all worth it. On February 5th, marine and wildlife teams gathered along the shores of Cape San Blas for what they called the largest turtle release they had ever conducted. Nearly 200 rehabilitated sea turtles were carried back to the Gulf of Mexico, one, by workers and volunteers. Spectators lined the beach, and as each turtle hit the water and began to swim, you could feel it, that rare intersection of devastation and hope playing out on a Florida shoreline. Now, here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because while the world was watching iguanas and manatees and turtles, a quieter catastrophe was unfolding beneath the surface, and the people who saw it, firsthand, are still shaken. The silent kill. Gulf water temperatures along southwest Florida's coast dropped into the low 50s. For warm water fish, that's a death sentence. Dr. Rick Bartleson, a marine research scientist with the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, explained that the worst damage happens in shallow areas, estuaries, canals, tidal flats, where water temperatures plunge the fastest. Invertebrates and bottom dwellers get hit first. But the species that had anglers and biologists holding their breath was the snook. Snook are subtropical. They start struggling when water temperatures fall below 54 degrees. Extended cold exposure causes cold shock. The fish become disoriented, stop processing oxygen, and die. And across Florida, the reports started flooding in, dead and cold-stunned snook in inshore waters, in canals, in estuaries, tarpon, jacks, sea trout, all washing up alongside them. Videos posted by local anglers showed long stretches of shoreline, covered in lifeless fish. And get this, the comparison everyone immediately made was to 2010, the last time Florida experienced a cold event of this magnitude. During that freeze, an estimated 1 million snook were killed in southwest Florida alone. 1 million. The FWC issued a statewide advisory ahead of this cold surge, warning that snook, tarpon, bass, and non-native freshwater species like tilapia and Mayan cichlids were all at risk. They asked the public to report fish kills so researchers could begin tracking the full scope of the damage. But here's the deal. The killing doesn't stop when the cold passes. Retired snook biologist Ron Taylor has seen this before. He explained that frigid temperatures damage the protective slime coating on tropical fish, leaving them exposed to infections and disease in the weeks and months that follow. Fish that survived the initial freeze could still die from secondary complications long after the temperatures rebounded. The true toll of this cold snap won't be known for weeks, maybe longer. Several local fishermen took to social media to beg the FWC to consider an emergency closure on snook and sea trout fishing until populations could be assessed. The fear was real, not just among scientists, but among the people whose livelihoods depend on healthy inshore fisheries. What this really means. Here's the thing that climate experts keep coming back to. Florida's winters are actually getting warmer. Average temperatures have been trending upward for decades. Cold snaps like this one are becoming rarer, not more common, but that's precisely what makes them so destructive. In a climate where ecosystems have gradually adapted to milder winters, a sudden Arctic plunge hits harder. Fish that have expanded their range northward get caught exposed. Wildlife that hasn't experienced a freeze in over a decade has no memory of how to survive one. The footage from early February 2026, frozen iguanas scattered across, neighborhoods, 900 manatees packed into a single spring, lifeless sea turtles washing ashore, dead fish lining the beaches, is a snapshot of what happens when nature collides with the extreme and the unexpected. It happened fast, it hit hard, and the recovery will take far longer than the cold itself. So, here's the question that keeps coming up. If cold snaps like this are getting rarer but more extreme, what happens to Florida's wildlife the next time the Arctic pushes this far south? And will these ecosystems be ready? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this footage hit you the way it hit us, smash that like button and subscribe so you're here when the next story drops. We'll see you in the next one.